For you that are a little bit worried about having a mentor home or having a drug rehab in your community or you starting one, first realize that everyone can have one. You can have one in your community, you can have one in your church. Your church can back it up, your community can back it up. It's very important that you get the right information. There's a lot of information on methamphetamine. There's a lot of information on drugs out there, a lot of information on drug addicts. And it gets very difficult. It starts to get very confusing. Do you trust them? Do you not trust them? How do you love them properly? Do you do hard love? Or when do you make those decisions for the addicts? I guess all of that takes time, and you'll learn how to do that as you go. And it'll get better as you go. I would ask probably that most of you try to take whatever classes that you can on trying to understand what drugs and alcohol do to the brain, pharmacology of the brain. Try to take classes on suicide or critical incident debriefing classes to learn to deal with people that are in really tough places. Those are other good classes. There's lots of classes in colleges that you can take on the psychology of the brain and stuff, dealing with people and their problems with drug and alcohol addiction. Some things that I want to talk to you today, just in general, is how do you know whether or not an addict is getting ready to come into the program? How do you know whether or not they're ready? How do you know whether or not they're broken or they're really to the bottom, as a lot of us would like to say? You're not going to. To put it bluntly, you're not going to. You're going to give it the best shot that you can. I don't know that there's any particular way. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I don't know if there's any particular way of doing this. But I want to walk you through some general steps that I think are very important for you. It's important for you to understand there's a 14-day chart for a drug addict to go through. In the start of this chart, he'll go up to a rush. This rush is what's called a plus 10. It's 10 times that of an orgasm on the body. And what it means is there's so much dopamine that is dumped into the system, if it's a stimulant drug, then it's 10 times on your body. Maybe not the actual feeling of an orgasm, but it is 10 times on your body of that. And what happens is your brain takes a picture of it, and when your brain takes a picture of it, it doesn't let you forget it. So it's important for you to realize that when you're dealing with somebody that is dealt with methamphetamine, cocaine, and those stimulant drugs, that you're dealing with somebody that whose brain has taken a picture of something that is far up and beyond what you and I have experienced. And it's very difficult not to go there. After a person goes through this rush, they go through what's called a shoulder. They go over the top of their rush and they come down onto what we know to be a binge. They try to binge and use again to get back up to that rush again, to have that good feeling come back into their life again. Usually they're hiding something, they're burying something, they're hiding their feelings, some of the things that they have been through in their life, some of the abuse that they've been through. 76% of the ones that we bring into this program have been raped or molested when they were younger by somebody that they trusted. So a lot of that is internal. They hide those particular things. We have 60% of our women and over 80% of our men that are actually given the drugs, or they find the drugs in their own home with their parents, or their parents give them the drugs or alcohol. So they're hiding those issues and they're dealing with those issues. So the reason that they use and binge to try to get back up to it is to bury a lot of stuff. A lot of the ones that you're going to get have lost their children over this. They've been told that they don't love their children, that they love the drug more than their children. Not in their minds. In their minds, they love their children. In their minds, they want their children really bad. But they're trying to bury all of that condemnation that's happened in their own life. Motivational intervention is going to be one of the most important tools that you will learn, one of the most important words that you will get a hold of outside of Jesus Christ himself, because that's what Jesus did for us. Motivational intervention is when you walk into a person's life and all of a sudden you reveal to them something that would motivate them, that they haven't experienced before, and it picks them up to new levels of understanding. After a person starts to binge to get back up to this, they're only going to do that for so long. The average addict that is binging on methamphetamine won't eat for a long period of time. They won't sleep for a long period of time. So they'll go through these incredible long spans of where there's sleep deficit and everything, and they start to fall apart. You can see usually their eyes start to sink back into their heads. Their complexion starts to get very, very bad. They're twitching all the time. They're constantly moving things around, and you can watch this take place. It doesn't mean they're at their bottom yet. It just means they're at what we know to be tweaking. A tweaker is somebody that is using very little of their brain, and they have a hard time standing still. They have a hard time concentrating on something. More or less, a lot of people would think that they're ADD. They have very low concentration levels at all. They can't listen to you for any period of time. They're constantly trying to fix something that doesn't even need fixed at all. They see things in the carpet that are moving around. They'll refer to them as bugs or meth bugs, but they're not really there, but they are in their mind. They'll tell you about shadow people, trees that turn into people. How everybody around them is cops, and they work for the CIB and the DEA. They'll think that their mothers and their fathers also work for the DEA. They get paranoid because of a lack of sleep, a lack of nutrition, and too much drugs. After a period of time, after they tweak for a while, they'll crash. They'll crash for about periods up to about 90 to 120 days of use. They'll keep crashing every time they come down off of these binging. After they crash, they try to get back up again. Some can crash for a day, some 2, 3, 4, 5 days where they're totally lethargic. Other people hardly crash at all. After you've been using for a period of time, like 90 to 120 days, you'll go into what's called power napping. Power napping, if you know anybody that's doing that, is 2, 3, 4 hours. They just crash really quick. They get up, they use, they slam, they smoke it again, get right back up and go back to their normal use again. That gets really scary because then they start breaking down their glial cells, their fat cells. They're eating a lot of the good cells in their body. And now it's only going to get worse and worse and worse. After they crash for a period of time, they're going to get back up and they're going to say, I'm never going to do this again. And they're going to tell you, I'm never going to do this again. That's probably not true. They probably are going to do it again. A statistic that I want you to know is this. An addict, or not necessarily an addict at this point, but a person that is stressed or depressed that uses methamphetamine for the first time, there's a 90% chance on that first time use that he will be totally, or she will be totally addicted to methamphetamine. We've never had a drug do that before. So you need to be aware that the addiction process for methamphetamine is right away. A person that comes out of that particular crash is going to think they're normal. They're going to think that they're done. They're going to tell you that they're never going to use this stuff again. They want to come home. They want their car back. They want their children back. And that'll usually be good up to 3, 4, possibly 5, 6 days, probably max. And then they're going to reuse again. You see, what happens is their body starts to produce something. It synthesizes the process of use, and their brain, which photographed that use before, is going to try to photograph it again. In fact, in some cases, it'll give dreams when they sleep, and they'll wake up high. They'll wake up what we know to be jonesing or wanting the drug really, really bad. So it's important for you to have this information. On a neuroscan, you can usually take a good look at the brain on how it peaks with the rush of methamphetamine. And then you can look at the neuroscan later, and they're not getting high at all, hardly, when they use. All they are is getting normal. And on the chart that you'll see, there is lines that are going down, and at the bottom of that line, after 9 months of use, that is their normal. And so when they get high and it raises up about that far, that's only to the other where they used to be normal. The only reason that your children or your parents or your brother and sister may be using today is so they can get up with their children. And so they can cook their meal for their family, or just so they can go to work. It's a serious, serious addiction. And for general education on this, it's important that you know that at the end of that 14-day cycle that repeats itself continually, okay, where they rush, they binge to try to get back up to it, they can't get back up to it, they end up getting into tweak mode, they crash, they come out thinking that they're normal, go to about 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days, and then all of a sudden they're right back into the use again. They're either going to rush or they're going to go into deep depression and withdrawal. Withdrawal from methamphetamine is mainly a mental thing. It's not necessarily a physiological thing. It could be a neurological withdrawal. They feel it though, and we must validate those feelings that they're going through. This is where motivational intervention really comes in. You can do it, and we're right here. The more you know, the more they'll trust you. If you don't know a whole lot, find out. There's lots of people that can answer your questions. We can answer your questions, or we can help you with what you're doing. There's plenty of avenues that you can take to try to be able to get to know the addict the best that you can, so you can really motivate them the best that you can. Now, from here, I want to take you into a little bit of information on the difference between pseudoephedrine, which is what they gas off basically to get methamphetamine. On a chart that you'll see in front of you, it's only missing an oxygen molecule. It's very easy to do. It can be done in your kitchen. It can be done in the bathroom. It can be done anywhere in the home, and you have things in your home that can be used to be able to produce this. It's a scary drug because it can be made so easy. Pharmaceutically correct stuff that's usually gassed off numerous times is hard to find out there. Now they're gassing it off once or twice. It's coming in white, gray, yellow, brown, where it's not even clean. The poisons are going into their systems and destroying a lot of their bodies. So there's not much difference between the actual pseudoephedrine and methamphetamine. And you can see the lack of the oxygen molecule in the methamphetamine. Another thing that you have to realize is we can usually track these people on a graph that you will see. There's 31 days in the month. Out of the 31 days, we can tell out of the 31 days when the methamphetamine addict or the stimulant addict is going to go through their worst times. There's going to be 2 to 3 consecutive days that they actually drop to the bottom of the chart, and you're not going to be able to really bring them out of it outside of educating them that they're going to go through it numerous times. Everybody goes through this. Everybody goes through this 2 or 3 days a month where you actually drop. You don't know why. You get up, you're feeling kind of down, but for an addict, there is no floor. There's nothing to stop them. So when you and I land on something, they don't land on a foundation. They just spiral down drastically. We'll be able to show you by looking at the chart when you're going to be able to expect your child to go through, or your family member or friend, when we expect them to go through their roughest time, and we'll protect them through that roughest time. So it's important for you to know that also. What makes an addict is one of the most important questions that we get often. An addict is someone that's been neuroadapted. Their brain is called neuroadaptation. Their brain is adapted to a drug, either up or down regulated, which simply means they either have more receptors or less receptors, or more transmitters that are trying to go across the synapse of the brain, but you don't have enough receptors, or you have too many receptors to get them. What I mean by that is, for instance, on your honeymoon, if you go out and you're going to get excited on your honeymoon, you have dopamine that is transferred out of the axon of the brain, and it tries to cross over the synapse of the brain into the receptors. Usually you have a minimal amount that cross through the synapse of the brain. But if you have a high of methamphetamine or cocaine or your stimulant drugs, you flood the synapse of the brain with many different transporters that are trying to get to the receptors, but there's not enough receptors. So the brain puts out information and says, we can't let them die, so we have to do something. In the reuptake port, what happens is it tries to suck them back in so the brain can reuse them, so it doesn't fall apart because the fluid of the brain is positively charged. Or what happens is the dendrite, where the receptors are, starts to build new receptors. Well, when you're only supposed to have 2 receptors that are here, and you have 2 dopamine that come into it, and then all of a sudden you got 8 receptors that are here, when you try to go back to do something normal again, you still have all these other receptors that are sitting here. So if 2 of them are used on your honeymoon, you still have 6 receptors that are sitting here saying, hello, I'm home, but nobody's here. They're looking and looking and looking. We call this jonesing. They want something really bad because their brain is telling them that they really, really need it. They're bored. In fact, the person that's used methamphetamine or a stimulant drug for a period of time has to be overstimulated to be stimulated at all. And that's something that you need to know to motivationally get inside of somebody's life. You're going to have to learn to stimulate that particular person or overstimulate them to get any type of joy from them at all. It's going to be very difficult for a short amount of time. It can take the addict a year, probably minimum, 6 months to a year. A year is usually a minimum, up to 3 and even 5 years to actually have his body and his brain regulate to what we know to be normal again. It's also important for you to know that just because a person is a methamphetamine addict, he is not destroyed and he's not dead and he can revive again. What happens to the brain is it lethargizes the brain for a period of time. And when it's lethargized, it needs to be woke up again. Once the brain wakes up, then the limbic system catches up to it. And emotionally, this particular person will catch up through a period of time. It's like looking at a 45-year-old person with a 16-year-old emotional system built into him. Not good at all, but it can be worked. It's different from acid or PCP or some of your LSD and stuff like that that fries the brain. Ecstasy is one that it'll destroy your brain. But for the most part, for this particular DVD here, we're dealing with methamphetamine and the effects of it. We believe that we've put together a good residential program, faith-based program. We believe that God works. We believe that we can actually help somebody to get off of drugs and alcohol and into a spiritual road to recovery. If you're interested at all in what you have seen on here and the testimonies that you have heard, feel free to get in contact with us if you're serious about starting your own mentor home or residential treatment in your community. Thank you.